The light rain was falling on the windshield as I adjusted the rearview mirror for the 100th time, more to avoid looking at myself than to actually check the traffic behind me. I've always had a love-hate relationship with visits to the family farm. Growing up in that little slice of paradise in the countryside shaped much of who I am today, but each return felt like diving into intense memories. Some sweet, others weighed down with a melancholy I preferred not to revisit. I parked the car next to the garden, meticulously tended by my mother, each flower strategically planted to look accidental. The scent of damp earth mixed with the subtle perfume of roses, filling me with a bittersweet wave of nostalgia. I took a deep breath before opening the car door. From a distance, laughter and muffled music came from the porch, a sign that the celebration was already in full swing. My mother's birthday was never a simple affair. For her, any excuse was good enough to gather the entire family. As I walked along the stone path to the entrance, I felt the air grow heavier, almost dense, as if each step brought me closer to something I couldn't quite identify but felt inevitable. And then I saw him, Dennis, leaning casually against the porch wall, a wine glass in hand. He wore that meticulously nonchalant smile he used as a sort of armor. Dennis was my mother's younger brother and a figure who always divided opinions in the family. Single at 40, with a reputation as a womanizer and a disconcerting ease with sarcasm, he seemed to carry a cloud of controversy wherever he went. "Joy!" he exclaimed, his blue-gray eyes sparkling with a familiar hint of mischief. "Look who's here to brighten up our party." He opened his arms as if expecting a hug, but it was obvious he enjoyed testing people's limits more than receiving any genuine gesture of affection. I hesitated for a moment, just long enough for him to notice. "Hi, Uncle Dennis," I replied, a small, carefully polite smile on my face. "Are you wearing the same shirt as always, or is it just my imagination?" His smile widened and I immediately knew I had given him the fuel he wanted. "Ah, darling, classics never go out of style and you know it." He winked, and the gesture, though playful, carried a disconcerting intensity. I stepped into the house, trying to ignore his presence behind me. The interior of the farmhouse was warm and vibrant, with overlapping voices, children running around, and my mother at the center of it all, orchestrating the chaos like an experienced conductor. Dennis, on the other hand, seemed out of place yet perfectly at ease amidst everything. It was infuriating how he made everything seem so simple, even when it clearly wasn't. I knew it was going to be a long night. Not just because of the party but because something hung in the air, a mix of curiosity and apprehension that I couldn't shake. Maybe it was Dennis's presence, or perhaps it was something bigger that I hadn't yet uncovered. Either way, I had the feeling this birthday would be more than just another visit to the farm. As always, I had dressed impeccably to face the new day at the farm. My long, straight hair, red like the sunset, stood out. Modesty aside, I am a very attractive young woman. A slim waist, a generous bust, and well-defined curves. Wherever I go, I notice eyes tracing my figure. And, of course, on top of that, I wear clothes that enhance my features even more. Tight jeans, short tops. I like to dress to get attention. And I got attention. My uncle, from the moment he laid eyes on me, didn't stop teasing me, making comments like, "How are you still single? A beautiful woman like you. I can't believe it. What's your flaw? You must have one." I would give him that awkward little laugh, a corner of the mouth smile. But something about him intrigued me. Every time he passed by me, he would touch my waist. At another moment, while we were sitting at the table during the meal, he placed his hand on my leg. I just pretended not to notice. And it didn't stop there. When I least expected it, he came up to me on the porch and hugged me. I won't lie, he's a charming man, gray-haired, bearded. Still, I turned to him and asked, "What are you doing?" He said he'd always felt attracted to redheads and that I caught his attention a lot. That ever since he saw me, he hadn't been able to stop thinking about me, not for a moment. He pulled me into the room saying he wanted me. I didn't reject him at any moment because, somehow, it didn't feel wrong. Suddenly he closed the door and there, in the dark of the room, he began to take everything off. His size and the touch of his hands on me were already enough to make me want that moment. His whispered words, praising my headlights, made me surrender with even more boldness. His firm grip on my skin, leaving the imprint of his fingers, made everything even more intense. It was surreal to think that, while my family was out on a trip, no one could have imagined what was happening there. I leaned forward and he, with his fingers, touched my strawberry. "I love strawberries," Like yours, he said. Our bodies, already sweaty from the adrenaline, still craved more. I wanted more. We did it twice from behind, and while he held one hand on my strawberry, the other was on my melon, which already had the headlight completely hard. His caresses were gentle and delicate, not too much pressure. This is what a woman likes. I kept repeating it several times until I reached the ultimate point. Hearing the car pulling into the driveway, we quickly got dressed and slipped out without anyone noticing. My face was still red from the intense activity just minutes before, but I tried to disguise it, saying I had been sunbathing in the yard. Hours passed and I could only think about the next time I would meet him again. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, he came to my room, and there we did things that are hard to forget. On the floor, the chair, and the counter. I sat on him several times, and after he spilled his milk on me, we started all over again. After that moment, we lay side by side in the silence of the room, our breathing still heavy, our bodies warm from the heat we had created together. I stared at the ceiling, trying to organize my thoughts, but it was hard to ignore the mixture of pleasure and confusion swirling inside me. He turned to me, his intense gaze meeting mine, and ran his fingers along my face, brushing a strand of hair away. "This stays between us, right?" he asked, his voice low and deep. I nodded without saying a word. Part of me knew that what we had just done could never leave that room. The other part, the more impulsive one, wondered if it even mattered. I got up and began dressing in silence. My reflection in the mirror showed me a version of myself that seemed different. Bolder, more confident, but also carrying a new sense of responsibility. He kept watching me as I adjusted my clothes, a faint smile playing on his lips. Before leaving, I stopped at the door and looked back. "This never happened, okay?" I said with a small smile, trying to sound casual but knowing we both carried the weight of that experience. He simply nodded, still with that intense gaze that seemed to read my every thought. As I left the room and walked down the empty hallway of the farmhouse, the sound of laughter from the family, who had already returned from their outing, began to fill the air. I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and prepared to face the rest of the day, knowing deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. As soon as I returned to my city, I tried to forget everything, but it was difficult. I kept remembering the feeling of being with him in those moments of heat and madness. He was so intense, he knew how to satisfy a woman. I fell in love with his way of being, but there was nothing to be done. After all, he was my uncle, my mother's brother. I try to forget that part and hold on to only the good memories. Maybe one day I'll find someone who stirs my mind the way he did.